Hello everyone and welcome to Algebra Theory. This year we are starting with Chapter 1 Equations and we're starting in the first section. If you see this 1-1, that means Chapter 1, Lesson 1. And the lesson is called Variables and Expressions. So in mathematics, it's really important to understand what words mean. And if you see here, we have Chapter 1 Equations. That's one vocabulary term. And then we have another variables and expressions. Let's just go ahead and talk about those and what they mean before we get started. So whenever you're talking about an equation, what an equation is, that is something that has an equal sign. So something like this, 3x plus 4 equals 1. That is an equation. Now in an equation, but you can have something that is called a variable. A variable is the thing that you don't know. We don't know what x is. It's a letter. But a variable can be any letter. It could be 3w plus 4 equals 1. That is an equation. Or it could be 3z plus 4 equals 1. Those are all different variables, and these are all equations because they have an equal sign. You can also have an equation that doesn't have a variable. That could be something like this. 3 plus 4 equals 7. Just pretty simple. It has an equal sign. That is an equation. Okay, we talked about equations. We talked about variables. That's a thing that can vary. It can change, and there can be different numbers that are put in for those letters. The third is an expression. Now, if we know what equations and we know what variables are, what is an expression? And an expression is something like this. It could just be 3z plus 4. Now, what's the difference between this here, 3z plus 4 equals 1, and 3z plus 4? What's the difference? And you're right, the difference is the equal sign. So expressions don't have equal signs, and equations do have equal signs. You can also have expressions that do not have a variable in it, like this has a z. You could just have something like 3 plus 4. That would be an expression without a variable. Okay, so whenever we do math, it's very, very important that we understand what the words mean. So chapter 1 is about equations, so we're going to be dealing with all different types of equations like this. But first, we're starting with variables, talking about these right here, and expressions, so without equal signs. So the objectives for today is to, number 1, translate between words in algebra. Number 2, evaluate algebraic expressions. So translating between words in algebra, that means there's going to be words and we're going to have to change those words into expressions like these here, using algebra, which means there's going to be a variable in the expressions. And then we're going to evaluate algebraic expressions, which means we're going to be given an algebraic expression. This is algebraic. This is not algebraic. 3 plus 4 is not algebraic. 3z plus 4 is algebraic. It's because there's a variable. So we're going to be dealing with these, and when it says evaluate, then we're going to have something like, well, evaluate it when z is equal to 2, and then we stick 2 in for z, and then we figure that out. So those are the different types of things that we're going to talk about today. So let's get started. We already kind of talked about variable. A variable is a letter or symbol used to represent a value that can change. Variable is very close to the word varies, and if you know varies, that's something that changes. So that's always helps me remember what variable means. I think about varies. So it's a letter that can change. Another is a constant. Well, constant, that means something that isn't changing, right? A constant is a value that doesn't change. So something like, x, you can put anything in for x. That can vary. But something like 3 doesn't vary. 3 is just 3. Okay, so 3 is a constant. 4 is a constant. 5 is a constant. 123 is a constant. So all numbers are constant, and all letters, W would be a variable, Y would be a variable. Okay, variables, constants. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is a numerical expression. Okay, so numerical, what does numerical mean? Well, that means that's like a number, right? And we talked about what an expression is. That's something that doesn't have an equal sign. So numbers with expressions. So may contain only constants and or operations. Now when they say constants, right, we're just talking about numbers. When we're talking about operations, what operations means, that means multiplication, that means division, that means subtraction, and that means addition. Okay, there's other operations out there too, but these are the main ones we're talking about today. So there are constants, which are numbers that that contain operations. So we could have something like an expression, so it doesn't have an equal sign. We could have 2 plus 3. We could have, that would be a numerical expression. We could have 4 divided by 8 minus 10 plus 3. That would also be a numerical expression. So there's all different types of numerical expressions out there. Okay, the next is an algebraic expression. What do you guys think that means? Well, algebraic, that is talking about the letters. An expression, again, is something where there's operations and there's no equal sign. So an algebraic expression may contain variables, so those are letters. It may contain constants, which are numbers, and or operations, which is, remember, multiplication, division, subtraction, or addition. Okay, so that is what an algebraic expression is. So next we're going to talk about some key words to mathematical operations. So the first is, and it's always important because remember what we're going to be doing is translating between words in algebra. So we have to know what certain key words mean a particular operation. So the first one we're going to talk about is addition. So a plus sign. So keywords for a plus sign would obviously be plus. Another would be sum or increase by. So anytime you're reading words and you see something that explains any of these words, you know that you're dealing with addition. You know you're dealing with the operation of addition. Okay? Let's go to the next one. Subtraction. The keywords for subtraction would be minus, difference, or less than. Those are all keywords for subtraction. Okay, the third would be multiplication. Now, the keywords for multiplication are times, product, and equal groups of. All of those keywords mean that you're dealing with the operation of multiplication. And then lastly, we're dealing with division. So the keywords for division would be divided by and quotient. Okay, so we're going to be using those keywords in the next example, few examples in just a minute. So let's talk about writing math. There's all different ways to write things, and so it's very, very important we know what means what. So these expressions all mean 2 times y. Now, what type of operation? What is times? Look up here. The key word for times is multiplication. So we know that we're dealing with multiplication here. Okay? 2 times y. Well, there are 6 different ways to write 2 times y. We can write it just like this, 2y. Whenever there's a number very, very close to a variable like that, that means multiplication. There's nothing in between them, so it's implied that they're multiplied by each other. This is 2 times y. You can also write it like this, 2 with this dot, y, 2 times y. You can write it like this, you know, this is an old school times symbol, y, but why is this not a good option now? Well, the reason why is because this multiplication sign looks like a variable, and now that we're dealing with variables, we do not want to write 2 times y in this manner when we start dealing with algebra and upper mathematics, because it can be very, very confusing, because one day you'll be dealing with this, 2xy, and that means 2 times x times y. All right, and we don't want to get that confused with 2 times y. So we're kind of going to be graduating from looking at multiplication with this x. We are now going to look at it like this, just like this, or with using parentheses over here. So 2 parenthesis y means 2 times y, or parenthesis 2 parenthesis y means 2 times y. Parentheses around the 2 and the y means 2 times y. So here are 6 different ways to use it, but we're really going to be using these 5. We're not going to use this particular way because that can get confused with this. That means 2 different things. So there's all different ways to write 2 times y, but the key is for you knowing that all of these things are really saying the same thing, 2 times y. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and move on to our first example. Example number 1, translating from algebraic symbols to words. So what we're going to do for each example is we're going to give 2 ways to write each algebraic expression in words. Remember, algebraic expression, algebraic means you're dealing with constant, which are numbers and variables, and expressions means there are no equal signs. So right here we have this algebraic expression, and how can we write that? Well, what are our key words? If we look back here for addition, we have plus, sum, and increase by. So we can say first x plus 3, or we can say the sum of x and 3, or if we wanted to do an extra, we could say x is increased by 3, or x increased by 3. Just say x increased by 3. Okay, perfect. Let's move on to the next one. Here we are dealing with subtraction. So what are the key words for subtraction? Well, we have minus, difference, and less than. Okay, so we could say m minus 7. That would be one way to write it. We could write the difference of m and 7. Or we can use less than. You could say this. You could say m less 7. But when you mean less means subtraction, than means flip. So we'd actually, if we use less than, we'd have to flip this and we'd have to say 7 less than m. Like that. Okay, let's go here. We have 2 and that dot, remember, means multiplication. So we could write that by saying, you know, 2 times y. We could say product. We could say the product of 2 and y. Or we could say 2 equal groups of y. All right, let's move on here to D. So this is division, so we could say k divided by 5 with these keywords here. Or we could say the quotient of k and 5. All right, well, that is it for example 1. So I will see you in a little bit and we'll talk about example 2.